Phoebe Bellamy signed her sister's name beneath a sentence Arabella would never have written. She held the pen above the page for one breath longer than honesty allowed. Tomorrow, the Duke of Alderwick would arrive. By the end of the house party, everyone expected him to ask for Arabella's hand, and the words that had brought him there belonged to Phoebe. The first letter had required only a few improved sentences. By the fifth, Arabella had brought a blank sheet and a plea. Their father called it sisterly loyalty. Phoebe called it temporary. Yet temporary things grew roots when they made everyone comfortable. She sanded the page, folded it, and pressed Arabella's seal into the wax. Then she lifted the blotter. Beneath it lay another letter addressed to Miss Phoebe Bellamy. She had read Lady Selwyn's decisive hand so often that the paper had softened beneath her thumb. I shall expect you in London on Monday fortnight. Your command of French is more than adequate, and your judgment is rarer. The position is paid. You will copy my continental journals, translate the French passages, and manage such correspondence as I choose to entrust to you. Paid. Entrust. To Phoebe Bellamy, she had already reserved a place for the journey to London. She had saved enough from years of copying accounts and translating dull sermons for neighbours to support herself for several weeks if Lady Selwyn proved difficult. After the house party, she meant to leave Bellamy Hall before anyone could discover another useful task that only Phoebe could perform. The plan had seemed clean until the Duke's reply arrived that afternoon. He was coming not merely as a guest. He was coming to formalize the understanding between their families. Phoebe slid Lady Selwyn's letter back beneath the blotter. She placed Arabella's sealed letter beside the candle and told herself, for perhaps the 100th time, that the deception had protected her sister. Arabella was admired for her beauty, her grace, and her ease in a room. None of those gifts made it easy to write to a man who asked what she believed, what she feared, and what kind of household she wished to build. Phoebe had answered because she could. That was not the whole truth. She had also answered because Edmund Fairfax read every word as if it mattered. No one had ever listened to Phoebe so carefully, even when he believed her to be someone else. At dinner the following evening, the Duke of Alderwick sat at Sir Malcolm's right hand. At 36, his face was controlled and his attention exact. He looked at a person as if he expected words to bear weight. Arabella, seated opposite him, looked radiant and frightened. Phoebe sat 4 places away, close enough to hear and far enough to be forgotten. The Dowager Duchess spoke of the weather. Sir Malcolm spoke of the shooting, and Arabella smiled when silence required it. Edmund answered each person with grave courtesy. Only once did his composure alter. "You wrote," he said to Arabella, "that a household reveals its character by the people permitted to speak when they have nothing profitable to offer." I have thought of that sentence often. Arabella's fingers tightened around her wineglass. Phoebe knew the line. She had written it without intending flirtation. That was why Edmund had valued it. Arabella glanced toward her. It was only a flicker. Edmund saw it. Phoebe lowered her eyes to her plate. "I am glad it stayed with you," Arabella said. "Why?" The question was gentle. It was also impossible. Arabella attempted a laugh. Must a woman defend every sensible thing she once wrote? The Dowager Duchess intervened with a remark about poetry. Conversation moved on, but something had changed. Edmund no longer looked only at Arabella. Twice Phoebe felt his attention cross the table and rest on her hands. After dinner, Arabella followed her into the dark passage beyond the drawing room. "I cannot do it," she whispered. "You need only survive 3 days. No, I cannot marry him. He asks a question and waits as if the answer matters. One day he will discover there is nothing in those letters that came from me." Phoebe felt an old, sharp instinct to make the difficulty smaller. She could prepare Arabella for tomorrow's walk. She could list Edmund's opinions, supply 3 observations, write another page. That instinct was the trap. "Then you must tell father," she said. Arabella stared at her. "He will say I have ruined us. If you marry a man who believes you are someone else, you will ruin yourself." The family council was called before breakfast. Sir Malcolm stood at the window of his bookroom, one hand pressed against the glass. The entailment of Bellamy Hall was never discussed plainly, but it lived in every marriage conversation. When he died, the house would pass to a distant male cousin. He believed security for his daughters could be measured only in husbands found before that day. The Dowager Duchess sat near the fire. Edmund stood behind her chair. Phoebe and Arabella faced them together. Arabella spoke first. "Your Grace, I cannot accept an offer from you. The letters have given you a false understanding of me." Sir Malcolm went white. "Arabella, let her finish," Edmund said. Arabella swallowed. "I did not write them alone. After the first two, I scarcely wrote them at all." Silence entered the room like another guest. Edmund looked at Phoebe. Sir Malcolm moved too quickly, desperation making him crueler than calculation would have done. The sentiments were suitable. The family is the same. Phoebe is my daughter as surely as Arabella. If His Grace valued the mind expressed in the correspondence, there need be no lasting injury. The Dowager Duchess's eyes sharpened. She looked Phoebe over with a new and colder interest. "The younger Miss Bellamy is certainly the more practical," she said. Phoebe felt the room rearrange itself around her. One daughter had been a face. The other was now being offered as a function. Edmund's shock had not yet settled into understanding. He said, too quickly, "If Miss Phoebe was the author, then the essential understanding may still exist." There it was. Not a proposal. Not yet. Something worse. A conclusion reached before anyone had asked whether she wished to be part of it. Phoebe stepped forward. "No, Your Grace." The single word stopped every other voice. She made herself continue. "I wrote the letters. At first I helped Arabella. Later I wrote because Father expected it, because she was afraid, and because I told myself I was protecting her. But I also wrote because you answered. I allowed a false name to carry my thoughts. That was my choice, and it was wrong." Edmund's expression altered at the last sentence, not softened, deepened. "Then we must determine what can be made right," he said. "You are already determining again." His brows drew together. Phoebe took Lady Selwyn's letter from her pocket. Her hand shook. "But the paper did not. I have accepted paid work in London. I leave on Monday. I will tell the truth in my own name before then. I will not become the correction to Arabella's refusal. I will not be exchanged for my sister, because the handwriting has proved more convenient than the face." Sir Malcolm said her name as a warning. Phoebe turned to him. "You asked me to give Arabella my words. You may not now give me away with them." She looked back at Edmund. For months he had known her mind without knowing her name. Now, at last, he saw the woman before him, and Phoebe made certain that the first true thing he heard from her was no. Edmund did not sleep. Long after Bellamy Hall had gone quiet, he sat with the blue packet open before him. He had thought anger would come first. Instead, he felt the more humiliating pain of recognition, the wit he had waited for, the refusal to flatter him, the questions that had made him answer more honestly than prudence allowed. All of it belonged to the woman who had looked him in the face and said no. Near dawn, he found the letter in which he had written about his father. That was the only page he carried to the morning room. Phoebe refused to discuss it until Arabella was invited. Sir Malcolm objected. The Dowager Duchess called the precaution unnecessary. Edmund opened the door himself and asked Arabella to join them. Phoebe stood beside her sister. "Arabella and I will each speak for ourselves. No question concerning her will be answered by me. No question concerning me will be answered by her." The Dowager lifted one brow. "You presume to set rules for a duke." "For myself, yes." Edmund placed the single letter on the table. "Then I have one question for each of you." He looked first at Arabella. "How much did you know?" Arabella's hands tightened, but she did not look to Phoebe for rescue. She admitted that the earliest letters had begun with her own observations. Phoebe improved them. Soon Arabella supplied only details, then sometimes nothing at all. "Why did you continue?" Edmund asked. "Because I was afraid of disappointing my father. Because the attention of a duke made every room kinder to me. Because each reply made it more difficult to confess than the one before." She drew a breath. "Those are reasons, not excuses." Phoebe heard the distinction and loved her sister for making it. Edmund turned to the page he had brought. "And this answer?" Phoebe knew it without touching the paper. Months earlier, he had described a childhood governed by the wreckage of a promise made in passion and abandoned in cowardice. His father had nearly married one woman, eloped with another, and left both households to carry the scandal. Edmund's mother had rebuilt the family by turning uncertainty into rules. Her son had learned the same lesson too well. Phoebe had answered that order could prevent chaos, but it could also become a wall no living person had agreed to inhabit. "I wrote it," she said. "Did you believe it?" "Yes." "Did you believe any of what you wrote to me?" The question stripped the room of every title in it. Phoebe met his eyes. "Every belief was mine. The right to receive your confidence was not." His face tightened. "Then none of it was real. The words were real. The circumstance was false. If you use the words to excuse the circumstance, you will repeat my mistake." For the first time since his arrival, Edmund had no method ready. He looked down at the letter. He had crossed half a county, believing he would meet the woman who had understood his fear. Now she stood within reach, and the first honourable act available to him was not to claim that understanding. Sir Malcolm seized upon the conclusion that suited him. His Grace admired Phoebe's principles. "Phoebe is free. There is no blood obstacle and no prior engagement. A private correction can be made." "There is a rather obvious obstacle," Phoebe said. "I do not agree." The Dowager Duchess folded her hands. "You may feel insulted by the manner in which the possibility arose. That is understandable, but one does not discard a secure future because the introduction was imperfect." Arabella went very still. Phoebe saw the injury before anyone else did. The Dowager was not merely offering Phoebe a place. She was erasing Arabella from the room as efficiently as the letters had erased Phoebe. "My sister is not an imperfect introduction," Phoebe said. "I did not say she was." "You did not need to." Edmund folded the letter. "Mother, there will be no discussion of marriage today." It was the first useful thing he had done. It was not yet enough. Arabella asked to speak before the meeting ended. She had spent most of her life making discomfort attractive. Now she stood without arranging her expression for anyone. "Your Grace, I owe you an apology that does not contain an offer of my sister." Sir Malcolm made a sound of protest. Edmund silenced it with a glance. Arabella continued. "I permitted you to believe I had written what moved you. Some of the details were mine, but the courage was not. I was afraid that if I wrote plainly, you would find me shallow. So I borrowed depth and made shallowness inevitable." "You are not shallow," Phoebe said. Arabella looked at her. "You may believe that without correcting what I have said." Phoebe felt the old impulse to help close around empty air. Edmund bowed his head. "I accept your apology. I owe you one as well. I came here certain that correspondence had given me sufficient knowledge to make a permanent decision. I expected you to become the woman I had assembled from pages." Arabella's surprise was almost painful. She had expected anger, because anger would have allowed her to become merely guilty. "Do not make the same demand of Phoebe," she said. "She wrote the thoughts, but she did not write the woman you now imagine." The Dowager Duchess rose. "That is enough confession for one morning." "Perhaps," Arabella replied. "We have had too little rather than too much." She left the room before her courage could be praised into obedience. When the others had gone, he asked Phoebe to remain. She stayed near the open window. He stood at the table with the single page between them. "Lady Selwyn," he said. "Does she know?" "Not yet. Your position involves her correspondence. If this becomes public, I know what it may cost me. I can prevent that cost." The speed of the offer chilled her more than cruelty would have done. "How?" "A word from me would establish that you acted under family pressure and that your ability is beyond questions. If Lady Selwyn remains uncertain, my mother requires someone to oversee foreign correspondence. You would have an income, rooms of your own, and complete respectability. He spoke as if he were laying stones across a dangerous stream. Each one was solid. Together they led exactly where he wished her to go. You have moved very quickly from marrying Arabella, Phoebe said, to considering marriage to me, to employing me in your household. I am trying to ensure that my arrival does not destroy your future. My future existed before your arrival, and may be damaged because of a correspondence in which I was involved. Then tell the truth when you are asked. Do not design the result. He looked genuinely perplexed. If I can secure a better result, why should I withhold it? Because it is not yours. The answer landed between them with the weight of another refusal. Phoebe softened her voice. Not her meaning, your grace. You may state what happened. You may take responsibility for your part, but you may not write to Lady Selwyn. Offer me another position. Ask your mother to protect me, or decide what safety should look like. You would prefer uncertainty. I would prefer uncertainty that belongs to me. He turned toward the open window. In the garden, guests walked beneath copper-colored leaves, moving through a world that appeared orderly because servants had swept every fallen branch from view. I have spent my life repairing the damage caused by people who mistook desire for permission, he said. And so you have decided that reason gives permission instead. He looked back at her. Phoebe did not know whether she had wounded him or merely named a wound already there. I will write to Lady Selwyn myself today, she said. She may dismiss me. If she does, I will still leave Bellamy Hall. Where will you go? That question is mine to answer. She collected a sheet of unused paper and carried it to the window desk. For years she had written the sentences other people needed. Now she began the most dangerous letter of her life. At the top of the page, before excuses could tempt her, she wrote her own name, Phoebe Bellamy. Lady Selwyn's answer came 2 days later. Phoebe knew before opening it that the news was not kind. The seal had been pressed cleanly, but the letter was thinner than the one containing the offer. Good news took room. Disappointment often required only a few exact lines. Lady Selwyn had not withdrawn the position. She had suspended it. The work entrusted to a companion included private correspondence and unpublished journals. Before Phoebe entered her household, Lady Selwyn required Arabella to write in her own hand and confirm that no one else had knowingly supplied a false reference. Until then, Phoebe was not to come to London. At the bottom, beneath a sentence expressing regret rather than anger, Lady Selwyn had added one question. Why did you tell me before anyone compelled you to do so? Phoebe read the line twice. It was not forgiveness. It was not dismissal either. It was the first consequence of the truth, and therefore one she could bear. Sir Malcolm could not. You see, he said when she informed him. This is what comes of excessive confession. Nothing was gained by alarming the woman before the matter was settled. They stood in the blue salon, where family portraits watched generations of Bellamy's solve difficulty by refusing to name it. Arabella sat near the fire with her hands clasped in her lap. Edmund had been asked to join them because Sir Malcolm still believed the Duke's presence could transform reality into an arrangement. Something was gained, Phoebe said. Lady Selwyn now knows the truth from me, and you have lost your position. It is suspended, a distinction without comfort. Comfort is not the only measure. Sir Malcolm's anger faltered. For an instant, he looked not authoritarian but old. Phoebe remembered that fear had governed him long before he tried to govern his daughters. Bellamy Hall would not be theirs. His health had grown uncertain. He looked at marriage and saw walls built around women he would no longer be alive to protect. The tragedy was that he had never asked what those walls would keep inside. If you leave without employment, he said more quietly, you will have little money and no household willing to answer for you. Phoebe laid a small card on the table. It bore the direction of a lodging house in London and the name of the woman who had agreed to hold its least expensive room for 2 weeks. Beside it, She placed the pearl brooch her aunt had left her. "The room is paid for," she said. "If Lady Selwyn dismisses me, the brooch will buy time." Sir Malcolm stared at the jewel as if it were evidence of a poverty he had failed to forbid. Edmund looked from the brooch to Phoebe. "You have already prepared to go." "I prepared for uncertainty." "That is different from arranging everyone else's answer." The rebuke was quiet. He accepted it in silence. Arabella rose. "She may also use the money from my allowance." Phoebe turned. "No. Why not? You used your time to protect me and helped create this danger. Your money cannot purchase my innocence." The words hurt Arabella. Phoebe saw it and did not know how to call them back without surrendering the truth within them. Edmund spoke for the first time. "Lady Selwyn has asked for confirmation. Miss Arabella can provide it. When she has done so, the position may be restored. And if it is not," Sir Malcolm demanded, "then Miss Phoebe will decide her next course." Phoebe looked at him. He had repeated her boundary almost exactly. It should have reassured her. Instead, she wondered why the words sounded rehearsed. That afternoon, Arabella began her letter. Phoebe found her in the breakfast parlour, surrounded by ruined sheets. "You have spelled conscientious 3 different ways," Phoebe said before she could stop herself. Arabella put down the pen. "Then Lady Selwyn will know the letter is mine." Phoebe sat opposite her. "Do you want help? I want you to read it when I am finished. I do not want you to change it." The request stung with justice. Phoebe folded her hands. "Very well." Arabella stared at the page. "I liked the letters at first. Not writing them, receiving his replies. Everyone treated me as if I had accomplished something merely because a duke found me interesting. I knew the interesting part was you. I told myself you did not mind. Sometimes I did not. That may be worse. It is more complicated." Arabella looked up. "Did you fall in love with him?" Phoebe's first instinct was denial. Her second was more honest. "I fell in love with being answered. I do not yet know the man well enough to name anything else." Arabella nodded slowly. "He knows that. I think he knows the difference between a lie and a record. I am not certain he knows the difference between care and control." Outside the room, footsteps paused and then moved on. Neither sister knew Edmund had heard. He spent the next hour walking the north terrace alone. Phoebe saw him once from the window, a dark figure among trees stripped by the wind. He did not look toward the house. The following morning, Edmund brought Phoebe 1 sheet of paper. "Lady Selwyn asked for the truth in a form she can follow," he said, "not a defense." Phoebe nearly refused to work with him. Then she saw Arabella's unfinished letter beside the blank sheet, visible proof that no one was again speaking without her knowledge. They reduced months of correspondence to 4 truthful lines. Arabella began it. Phoebe increasingly supplied the words. Both sisters allowed the false name to continue. Edmund trusted a voice without asking whether the woman before him could freely answer for it. There was no need to divide every sentence. Only once did the restraint break. Edmund found Arabella's description of a quartet as 4 birds arguing in a hedge. That was hers, Phoebe said. "I disliked it." "Arabella dislikes quartets." "Do you?" "I dislike being trapped beside people who pretend to enjoy them." His smile appeared, then faded under the awareness that he was smiling at the woman behind the letters. The final line concerned the letter about his father. Edmund had written it because he was tired of being valued chiefly as a title capable of solving other people's futures. Phoebe noticed the irony before he did. "You dislike being treated as an answer," she said. "Yes. Yet when the truth appeared, your first response was to become one." His hand stopped above the page. "I offered practical protection. You offered the form of protection most comfortable to you. Would you have preferred indifference? Those are not the only choices." The exchange left them both raw, yet neither abandoned the table. The page contained no elegant prose, only responsibility. Phoebe signed her section. Arabella would sign after completing her own letter. It did not prove that Phoebe was the better Bellamy sister. It proved that 3 people had used one another's silence, and that each would now have to speak under a separate name. Edmund did not sign. Lady Selwyn did not ask for my confirmation. Not yet. If she does, I will answer. That should have ended the matter. But the same evening, the Dowager Duchess joined her son in the west drawing room. She had spent the day observing Phoebe correct a servant's French inventory, calm Sir Malcolm, and help Arabella speak without rescuing her. She would manage Alderwick well, the Dowager said. Edmund did not answer. The correspondence can be explained. Miss Phoebe is not a beauty like her sister, but beauty is a poor steward. She is discreet, educated, and unlikely to be foolish with rank. If she refuses marriage from pride, a formal place in our household would give her time to reconsider. Edmund heard only the final word, time. He imagined Phoebe in London with little money, her position suspended because of letters written partly to him. He imagined society discovering the exchange and deciding she had hunted a duke through her sister's name. He imagined acting too late. Order had always been his answer to fear. Before dinner, he wrote to Lady Selwyn. He explained that Phoebe possessed exceptional judgment and that the deception had developed under family pressure. He assured Lady Selwyn that no dishonor attached to employing her. Then, believing himself restrained, he added that the Dowager Duchess was prepared to offer Phoebe a secure position at Alderwick House if Lady Selwyn preferred to release her. He sealed the letter without telling Phoebe. In his mind, he had not broken his promise. He had not commanded Lady Selwyn. He had not ordered Phoebe to accept. He had merely arranged that no dangerous uncertainty could survive. For 3 days, Phoebe knew nothing of Edmund's letter. Those were the gentlest days of the house party, which was why she would later remember them with anger as well as tenderness. The 4-line record had been completed. Arabella was writing in her own hand. Sir Malcolm had agreed, under pressure from both daughters, that no announcement would be made. The Dowager Duchess no longer spoke openly of substitution. For a brief interval, the danger appeared contained. Phoebe and Edmund met without planning to. In the orangery, she found him examining a lemon tree that had produced leaves, but no fruit. He confessed that he knew nothing about citrus. She confessed that she had come there because every other room contained someone trying not to discuss her future. Then I should leave, he said. You are not discussing it. Not yet. The honesty made her smile. They walked between the tall windows while rain traced silver paths down the glass. Without the letters spread between them, Edmund seemed less certain of where to place his hands. Phoebe had imagined him for months as a mind written in dark ink. Grave, controlled, unexpectedly dry. The living man carried silence differently. Sometimes he used it to listen. Sometimes he used it to prevent himself from feeling. Why did you answer the first difficult question? He asked. Which one? What would you preserve if your home could keep only one virtue? Phoebe remembered. I wrote truth while signing another woman's name. Yes. He glanced at her. The answer had not pleased him, but it had not allowed him to despise her either. The contradiction troubles you, she said. It should trouble you. It does. That is why I can look at it. They stopped beside the lemon tree. Phoebe touched one curled leaf. I thought the name was only an envelope. I believed the thoughts would remain mine because I had formed them. But a thought given away without a name becomes useful to whoever receives the credit. I knew that in every other part of my life, I chose not to know it in the letters because you answered as if my mind were not an inconvenience. He absorbed the rebuke without turning it aside. I came to Bellamy Hall, he said, because the letters made me believe I might be known without performing certainty every moment. You came to marry Arabella. I came to marry the woman I believed had written them. That woman does not exist. You exist. The words were quiet. They were also dangerous. Phoebe stepped back from the tree. Recognition is not permission. Your Grace, Edmund. She looked at him. In the letters, you called me Edmund. Arabella called you Edmund. Did she? Phoebe felt heat rise beneath her collar. On the page, I could forget the difference. And here, rain struck the glass more sharply. For one unguarded moment, she wanted to tell him that here the difference was worse. Here he had a voice and a face, a history that had shaped him, and the power to alter a room merely by entering it. Here she could not pretend affection was safe because it had no body. Here, she said, the difference is the only thing that matters. He did not move closer. That restraint reached her more deeply than pursuit might have done. Later the same day, Arabella completed her letter. She read it aloud in the small parlor. Her sentences were uneven. She repeated the word afraid 4 times. Once she lost her place and began again. Phoebe noticed 3 grammatical errors and corrected none of them. Arabella described the pleasure of being admired for letters she had not written. She described Sir Malcolm's expectations without using them as a shield. She described Phoebe's help and her own willingness to keep accepting it. At the end, she wrote that she would not marry Edmund, not because he had become undesirable, but because the courtship had never belonged to either of them as themselves. She signed her name. "It is not elegant," Arabella said. "It is yours," Phoebe replied. For the first time since the confession, the sisters embraced. The letter from Lady Selwyn arrived the following morning while Phoebe was at breakfast. Sir Malcolm passed it to her without comment. Edmund sat 2 places away. The Dowager Duchess was discussing the final ball planned for Saturday evening, though no one had yet explained what the ball was meant to celebrate. Phoebe broke the seal. Lady Selwyn acknowledged receipt of the sisters' separate letters. She had not reached a final decision. Before doing so, she wished to clarify a new circumstance. The Duke of Alderwick had written to assure her of Phoebe's character. He had also informed her that the Dowager Duchess could provide Phoebe with a secure position at Alderwick House. Lady Selwyn's question was simple. Had Phoebe asked him to intervene? The breakfast room seemed to recede from her. All its polished surfaces, silver lids, and porcelain cups became details in a picture she no longer occupied. She laid the letter beside her plate. "No," she said. Edmund's attention sharpened. "What has happened?" Phoebe met his eyes. "Lady Selwyn has received your letter." He did not deny it. The Dowager Duchess set down her cup. Sir Malcolm looked from one to the other, as if hoping authority might still be found somewhere in the room. "I asked you not to write," Phoebe said. "I did not ask Lady Selwyn to dismiss you. I made certain she understood that you would not be left without a respectable position. You offered me to your household. I offered you security, without asking whether I wanted it. You had said you intended to leave even if the position was lost. So you decided that my refusal proved I could not be trusted with the risk." His voice lowered. "I decided that my involvement should not cost you your livelihood." Phoebe stood. The room stood with her in startled silence. "When my family needed a courtship, they put my words beneath Arabella's name. When your family needed a capable woman, they put my future beneath yours. You have done the same thing more politely." Edmund rose as well. "That is not what I intended. Intent is the refuge of people who still possess every advantage after the harm is done." The sentence struck him. She saw it. Part of her wanted the sight to satisfy her. It did not. "I wrote because Lady Selwyn's uncertainty was created by letters sent to me," he said. "Her uncertainty was created by my deception. Your letter created a second question, whether I can make any decision without a duke arranging the acceptable answer. What would you have had me do? Nothing without my knowledge. Nothing. You think nothing is the opposite of care. Sometimes it is the space in which another person is allowed to act." Edmund looked as if she had removed the floor beneath a structure he had spent years building. Phoebe took Lady Selwyn's letter. "The truth is on the page. I will not work with you again. I will answer Lady Selwyn and leave on Monday, whether she employs me or not. Phoebe." It was the first time he had spoken her name without a title. She hated that it still mattered. "Do not use my name to make this feel intimate," she said. "You have just used your rank to close the very uncertainty I told you I needed." She left the breakfast room. Edmund took one step after her. then stopped. Arabella rose from the table. "Do not ask me to bring her back," she said. "I was going to ask whether she would speak to me later. That is the same request wearing better manners." The Dowager Duchess objected, but Edmund scarcely heard her. "You knew I had written to Lady Selwyn?" Arabella asked. "No." "Would you have approved if you had known?" Arabella considered. "A week ago, perhaps. I would have thought any position connected to a duchess safer than work in London. I am beginning to understand that safety can be another word for a decision made where the woman concerned cannot hear it." Edmund looked toward the door through which Phoebe had gone. "How do I repair this without speaking to her?" "You repair what you did. Whether she speaks to you afterward is a different matter. And if my repair creates another difficulty, then you do not hide it. You seem to believe a good action is one that leaves no disorder. Sometimes it is the action that leaves the disorder with the person who caused it." Edmund heard Phoebe in the argument, but the words were Arabella's, less precise, more impatient, entirely her own. He bowed. "I will not ask you to carry a message." "Good. I have retired from representing other people's voices." Arabella followed her sister, leaving Edmund with the first consequence no arrangement could remove. He had to decide what was right without using either woman as the path to forgiveness. The house did not erupt behind her. No one shouted. No glass shattered. That would have been easier. Instead, Bellamy Hall continued with the smooth efficiency of a place accustomed to absorbing women's refusals until they sounded like temporary emotion. Phoebe reached her room, closed the door, and took Lady Selwyn's first appointment letter from beneath the blotter. For weeks it had represented escape. Now it represented a harder task. She would no longer prove that she was the mind Edmund had wanted. She would no longer persuade either family that she was the correct woman to place beside him. Her plan changed. She would separate her future from every arrangement built around the letters, even if doing so cost the future she had prepared. Phoebe began by writing to Lady Selwyn again. This time, she did not explain Edmund's motives. She stated only that she had neither requested nor authorized his intervention, that the position at Alderwick House had never been offered to her directly, and that she would not accept it if it were. She enclosed the 4-line record, Arabella's signed letter, and 3 pages of translation Lady Selwyn had sent as a test months earlier. Then she wrote the sentence she had avoided in her first confession. "I continued the correspondence not only from pressure or loyalty, but because I took pleasure in being heard, while another woman carried the risk of being known." She stared at the words until they ceased to look like punishment and became a fact. Arabella entered without knocking. "Father says the Saturday ball will proceed." It was always proceeding. Not like this. "The Dowager has asked the musicians to prepare for an announcement." Phoebe put down her pen. "Of what? No one will say. Father believes that if you and the Duke stand together before the guests, every ugly interpretation will disappear." Has Edmund agreed? He has not refused in words Father is willing to understand. The distinction made Phoebe close her eyes. Arabella saw the letter on the desk. "May I read it?" Phoebe handed it to her. When Arabella reached the line about carrying the risk, she stopped. "Is that what you think I did? Isn't it? You think I carried no risk because people admired me." Every reply made me more terrified of the moment he would look at me and find no one there. "You could have stopped. So could you." The truth struck both of them at once. Arabella laid the page down with care. "You disappear and call it sacrifice. Then you resent us for failing to notice what you hid." Phoebe's throat tightened. "And you accept what I give until the cost becomes visible." "Yes," Arabella said. "I did." Phoebe had prepared herself for denial, not admission. Arabella went on. "I liked being thought clever. I liked Father's relief. I liked that a duke's attention made women invite me closer to the fire. I told myself you preferred the shadows because you were better suited to them. It was convenient to believe you had chosen the place where I left you." Phoebe looked at the translation pages, at the orderly lines that could not contain the disorder between them. "I did choose it sometimes," she said. That is the part I must answer for. Arabella pulled a chair beside the desk. Then let us stop rescuing each other without permission. What do you want? Phoebe asked. Arabella frowned as if the question had been posed in a language she had never studied. Not what father wants. Not what will prevent scandal. What would you choose if no room were waiting to approve it? Arabella walked to the window. I would go to Aunt Charlotte in Kent for the winter. She knows everyone and impresses no one. I would like to discover whether I enjoy music. When no gentleman is measuring my accomplishments, I would like to write a letter slowly enough to find out what I think before someone praises it. That sounds lonely. Perhaps, but it would be my loneliness. Phoebe recognized her own argument and smiled. Arabella turned back. And if I decide next year that I want marriage, I will enter it as a woman who has heard her own voice in an empty room. For the first time, Phoebe saw that Arabella's beauty had not made her visible. It had made her continuously observed. The sisters had been hidden in opposite ways. Phoebe behind usefulness, Arabella behind admiration. Neither could become free by taking the other's place. They amended nothing in each other's letters. Arabella added one paragraph in her own hand. Phoebe sealed her packet. Each pressed her own signet into separate wax. In his rooms across the East Wing, Edmund received a different kind of truth. Before his mother arrived, he reread 3 of his own letters. He had believed the correspondence proved his caution. He had not spoken of love. He had made no reckless promise. He had asked sensible questions about duty, household, and principle, then congratulated himself when the answers aligned with his own. Now he noticed what he had ignored. Whenever the writer disagreed with him, his next letter became longer and more persuasive. Whenever she described a future outside marriage, he answered by explaining how such independence might be made safer under proper protection. Even before he knew Phoebe's name, he had treated her resistance as a problem requiring a better argument. One sentence, written in his own hand, stopped him. Surely any rational person would choose the security of a settled position over the vanity of uncertain freedom. At the time, Phoebe had answered with humor. She had written that rational people often define vanity as the cost they did not personally have to pay. He had admired the sentence and changed nothing. Edmund folded the page. The deception had hidden Phoebe from him, but it had not created his blindness. She had warned him before they met. He had mistaken the pleasure of being challenged for the willingness to be changed. His mother did not deny planning the announcement. Sir Malcolm has spoken too freely, the dowager said. Guests already suspect an alteration. Silence will produce a scandal larger than a decisive conclusion. There is no conclusion. There is every reason for one. Miss Phoebe understands your mind. She has the discipline Arabella lacks. She can manage correspondence, household disputes, and your tendency to mistake solitude for peace. Edmund heard the list as he might once have heard an inventory of virtues. Now he heard what Phoebe had heard. Useful, suitable, secure, not free. You are describing an office, he said. I am describing a duchess. You have not described Phoebe. His mother studied him. Do not become sentimental because she has refused you twice. She has not refused me twice. I have never asked her a question that allowed a free answer. The dowager's composure thinned. Your father asked questions freely. He made promises freely. Other people paid. And we learned the wrong lesson. We learned not to let desire rule consequence. I learned to rule consequence until no one else could move. He said it without drama. That made it impossible to dismiss. The dowager turned toward the fire. If you stop the announcement now, society will say the younger sister trapped you through the elder, or that both rejected you. The Bellamys will lose the alliance. You will appear indecisive. Then I will appear indecisive, and Miss Phoebe's reputation will not be repaired by making the false conclusion true. For the first time, Edmund understood that repair could not mean producing the neatest ending. It meant removing the advantage that made refusal costly. Even when disorder remained, he went directly to the West writing room. The letter to Lady Selwyn required only 6 sentences. He stated that Phoebe had not requested his interference. He admitted that his offer of another position had exceeded his right. He withdrew every recommendation, favourable or unfavourable, and asked Lady Selwyn to judge Phoebe only by the material Phoebe supplied. He did not praise her intelligence. Praise from a duke could be another pressure disguised as generosity. He signed his name and sealed the letter. The next document was addressed to Sir Malcolm and his mother. It stated that no engagement existed with either Bellamy daughter, that Edmund had permitted discussions to continue after both women had withheld agreement, and that any contrary report would be corrected as his presumption, not their misconduct. He signed that too. When he rose, he saw the blue packet of letters on the adjoining table. The Dowager had ordered them brought from the morning room, perhaps believing possession could help control the ending. Months of Phoebe's mind lay inside, each page carrying Arabella's name. Edmund picked up the packet. His first impulse was to burn it and end the danger. His second was to return it and let Phoebe decide what should survive. That difference, small enough to fit in his hands, was the beginning of change. By Friday evening, the house had become a machine built for a conclusion no one had chosen. Flowers arrived from the Alderwick conservatories. Musicians rehearsed in the ballroom. Extra candles were set along the gallery, each flame waiting to illuminate the moment Sir Malcolm believed would restore his daughter's future. Phoebe watched from the upper landing as servants carried white roses toward the ballroom. She felt no anger toward them. They were completing work assigned by people who would never have to ask whether obedience and agreement were the same thing. She returned to her room and packed only what she could carry without assistance. Arabella packed in the adjoining room. Though she was not leaving for London, she had written to their widowed aunt in Kent and asked to stay for the winter. It was not a grand escape. It was simply a future not selected at a breakfast table. Sir Malcolm found them before dinner. "You will both attend tomorrow," he said. Phoebe folded a shawl. "As your daughters, perhaps, not as candidates." "There will be no candidates. The Duke will clarify his intentions." Arabella stepped into the doorway between the rooms. "Has he told you what those intentions are?" Sir Malcolm's silence answered. "You are trusting another arrangement you have not confirmed." Phoebe said, "I am trusting that a man of honour will not permit 2 women to be ruined by a confusion involving his courtship. A man of honour may discover that he cannot prevent every consequence." Easy words from someone who does not understand what happens when I am gone. The pain in his voice stopped her. Sir Malcolm looked at the half-packed trunks. "This house will pass away from you. I have been trying to secure what I can." Arabella went to him. "You have tried to secure us by making us acceptable to men with stronger houses. You never asked what would make either of us able to live in them." He looked at his elder daughter as if beauty had spoken in an unfamiliar language. Phoebe said, "We know you are afraid, but your fear cannot be the signature beneath our lives." Sir Malcolm left without blessing their plans or forbidding them. It was not reconciliation. It was the first time he had carried his fear out of a room without requiring one of his daughters to solve it. Phoebe went downstairs after him, intending to send her sealed packet before dinner. She found Edmund in the entrance hall, already dressed for the evening, his coat dark against the pale stone. A footman took Phoebe's letter and left. Neither of them spoke until the door closed. "My mother intends an announcement tomorrow," Edmund said. "I know. I can prevent it." The words were dangerously familiar. He heard the error himself. "No, I must prevent it. The announcement would be false, whether you wish to remain or not." Phoebe studied him. "What will it cost?" "The alliance between our families. My mother's confidence for some time. The appearance that I understand my own affairs. Society will likely conclude that one or both Bellamy sisters refused me. One did. Both did. In different ways." She had not expected him to say it without resentment. "And what do you expect it to purchase?" she asked. "Nothing. Not forgiveness. No, not a letter after I leave." His control slipped just enough for her to see what the answer cost. "No. If Lady Selwyn dismisses me, will you offer another position?" "No. If I go to London and never speak to you again." He was silent for one breath. "The announcement will still be stopped," he said. Phoebe felt no triumphant release. Trust did not return, because a man finally understood the question. But something in the space between them ceased to be a contest. "Then you know what must be done," she said. "Yes." He did not ask her to remain while he did it. He did not offer to escort her to dinner. He stepped aside, leaving the passage open. Phoebe walked past him and understood that letting someone pass could be a more difficult act of love than asking her to stay. The notice Edmund had signed was already crossing the hall. Sir Malcolm read it before dinner and came to the entrance hall with the dowager beside him. Neither was interested in another meeting. They wanted only to know whether Edmund could still be moved. "You would have society believe you were refused?" Sir Malcolm asked. "I was refused." The dowager's voice sharpened. "You will look like a fool. Then I will bear the cost." He did not explain further. The notice said no engagement existed, that he had permitted an assumption, and that any embarrassment belonged to his presumption rather than either sister's conduct. The dowager looked toward Phoebe. For one suspended moment, Phoebe expected another solution. None came. The ball proceeded on Saturday, but the white roses were divided among ordinary vases. No Bellamy daughter was placed beside the Duke of Alderwick for inspection. An elderly viscountess asked Edmund about the rumoured engagement. Phoebe heard his answer from across the ballroom. There was no agreement. "I permitted an assumption I had no right to permit." He did not name either sister. He did not add enough to make himself look misunderstood. When his eyes found Phoebe's, he did not cross the room. That was the first apology she believed, not because it was sufficient, but because it demanded nothing from her. Arabella slipped her hand through Phoebe's arm. "Do you wish he would come? Part of me does. The rest needs to know he can do what is right, when I am not the reward at the end of it." Together they stepped onto the terrace. Cold air met them with welcome honesty. The reply from Lady Selwyn arrived late that night. She had read both sisters' letters. She had compared Phoebe's translation with the original pages. She had also received Edmund's withdrawal of his intervention. Her decision rested, she wrote, upon the first two things. The position was Phoebe's again, if she still wished to take it. Phoebe sat on the edge of her bed, with the letter open in her hands. Relief came first, so strong it made her dizzy. Then grief followed. She had nearly lost the future she wanted through choices she had helped make. Recovery did not erase responsibility. Arabella read the final line over her shoulder. "You leave on Monday," she said. "Yes. Are you happy?" Phoebe considered the packed trunk, the quiet house, the man downstairs, who had finally stopped trying to keep her. "Not yet," she said, "but I am free enough to become so." Monday morning came pale and windless. Phoebe dressed before the maid arrived. She wore her plain grey travelling gown and pinned her hair without ornament. On the table lay 2 letters from Lady Selwyn, the first offer and the second confirmation. Between them rested the confession Phoebe had signed. 3 versions of a future, all written in her own name. Arabella came to help close the trunk. She was still in her wrapper, her hair loose over one shoulder. "I have changed my mind," she said. Phoebe looked up. "Not about Edmund. About being brave. I dislike it." Phoebe laughed, and the laugh became a sob before she could prevent it. Arabella sat beside her on the floor. "I thought, when the truth came out, one of us would be freed and the other punished," Arabella said. "That is how father understands choices. One saved daughter, one difficult daughter, one admired, one useful. We helped him keep those divisions. We did." Phoebe leaned her head against her sister's. "What will you do in Kent?" Write very bad letters to our aunt. Refuse to let you improve them. Possibly become excellent at being tiresome. You have always possessed talent." They remained there until footsteps sounded in the corridor. Sir Malcolm stood at the open door. He did not apologize. Phoebe had not expected him to acquire a new language overnight. He held a small purse, which he placed on the table. "It is not payment," he said, "and it is not permission. It is part of what your mother left for both of you. I should have given you control of it earlier." Phoebe did not reach for the purse immediately. "Are there conditions?" His mouth tightened. "No." She took it. Sir Malcolm remained by the table. "I believed usefulness would protect you," he said. "Arabella could enter a room and be welcomed. You could make yourself necessary once you were inside it. I thought those were forms of safety." Phoebe closed her fingers around the purse. They were ways of surviving what you would not change. Perhaps it was the nearest he had ever come to admitting uncertainty. Arabella asked, "What will you tell Cousin Walter when he says we have wasted our best chance?" Sir Malcolm looked from one daughter to the other, that the chance was not mine to spend. Phoebe's eyes burned. She wanted a larger apology, one capable of reaching backward through every letter and every dinner at which her future had been discussed as property. Such apologies existed only in stories unwilling to respect how slowly people changed. What her father offered was smaller, money released without conditions, a fear carried in his own hands, and one sentence he could not easily unsay. For that morning, it was enough to let departure remain departure rather than exile. That was all. Sir Malcolm kissed Arabella's forehead, then Phoebe's. He left before emotion could become negotiation. The hired chaise waited at the front steps. It was an ordinary vehicle, dark green and slightly worn, chosen by Phoebe from a local posting house. No Alderwick crest marked the door. No ducal servant held the reins. Lady Selwyn had offered to send her carriage. Phoebe had declined. She wanted the first miles of her new life to be purchased with her own money. Her trunk was secured. Arabella wrapped her in a final embrace. Sir Malcolm stood beneath the portico, one hand on his cane. Only then did Phoebe see Edmund. He had waited beyond the steps rather than inside the hall. He carried the packet of letters tied with blue ribbon. He did not approach until she looked at him. "May I return these?" he asked. "Not I brought these. Not we must speak. May I?" Phoebe nodded. He placed the packet in her hands. It was heavier than she remembered. "My mother had them moved," he said. "For several hours I believed I should destroy them. Why did you not?" "Because they are evidence of your wrong, Arabella's wrong, and mine. They are also your words. I had no right to decide which fact mattered more." Phoebe ran her thumb beneath the ribbon. "Some of your words are here too. Then you may return them, keep them, or burn them. You do not want them." Pain passed across his face, controlled but not concealed. Wanting them is not the same as owning them. The answer reached the part of her that still remembered candlelight and ink, the astonishment of seeing her thoughts taken seriously. It would have been easy to convert that feeling into forgiveness. Easier still to let his suffering prove that he had changed. Phoebe would not use emotion as evidence when conduct had only just begun. "Lady Selwyn restored the offer," she said. "I know only that she received my correction. I did not ask for her decision. She says she relied upon our letters and my work." Relief entered his expression. He did not claim any part of it. "I am glad. Are you?" He understood the question beneath the question. "I wish the road to your happiness did not lead away from me," he said. "But I am glad it is a road you chose." The driver adjusted the reins. Somewhere behind the house, a dog barked. The ordinary world continued. Indifferent to whether a duke had found the correct words, Edmund took one step back, leaving the path to the carriage open. "I will not ask you to answer what I feel," he said. "I will not ask Lady Selwyn about you. I will not send my mother, your father, or Arabella to speak for me. If there is ever another letter between us, it will begin where you choose and end when you choose. Phoebe looked at the man she had once known only through pages. In the letters, he had seemed unusually honest, because he admitted fear. In life, honesty required more. It required allowing fear to remain unresolved. When resolving, it would take another person's freedom. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Live with the answer you have already given. No flourish, no promise to wait forever, no demand that she remember him kindly." Phoebe climbed into the chaise. Arabella closed the door. Sir Malcolm raised one hand. Edmund remained where he was. As the carriage moved down the drive, Phoebe did not look back immediately. She watched Bellamy Hall pass beyond the glass, the windows where she had written for Arabella, the terrace where Edmund had learned what refusal meant, the front steps on which no one had stopped her. At the turn of the drive, she looked. Edmund had not followed. He stood beside Arabella and Sir Malcolm, separate from them, holding no authority over the direction Phoebe travelled. Then the trees closed around the road, and Bellamy Hall disappeared. Phoebe untied the blue ribbon. She read none of the letters. Not yet. Instead, she placed Lady Selwyn's offer on top of the packet, her own name visible above every borrowed page. 4 months later, Phoebe sat at a desk overlooking a narrow London square and translated a sentence no one else in the room could untangle. Lady Selwyn had written the passage 20 years earlier in Provence. Time had faded the ink and improved her opinion of her handwriting. "It says the innkeeper offered us pears," Phoebe said. "Impossible. I detest pears. Then your younger self lied to posterity." Lady Selwyn considered this. "Keep the pears. They make me sound gracious." Phoebe marked the line and smiled. The work was neither glamorous nor effortless. Lady Selwyn was impatient, exacting, and capable of changing her mind after Phoebe had completed an entire page. It was also Phoebe's work. In her second month, Lady Selwyn rejected a translation because Phoebe had softened an angry passage into polite English. Phoebe recognized the old habit beneath it. She had made another woman's words easier for the world to receive. "You have improved my manners," Lady Selwyn said. "I did not employ you to do so." Phoebe restored the anger. The next week, Phoebe refused to copy an angry letter until Lady Selwyn decided which injury actually mattered. They argued, revised, and signed the final letter with Lady Selwyn's name. That small exchange taught Phoebe more about honest service than years of silent usefulness. She could lend skill without surrendering authorship. She could challenge without taking possession. Another person's imperfect voice did not require replacement by her better sentence. Phoebe was paid, had a small private room, and was answered directly when Lady Selwyn disagreed with her. On the proofs of the first published section, beneath Lady Selwyn's name, appeared a single line, "French passages translated by Miss Phoebe Bellamy." Recognition felt different when it followed work she had chosen to give. Arabella wrote badly punctuated, entirely alive letters from Kent. She had declined 3 proposals without asking Phoebe to compose the refusals. Sir Malcolm wrote less often about weather, estate news, and whether Phoebe had enough coal. None of his letters contained the word ungrateful. Edmund wrote nothing. At first his silence felt like absence. Then it became evidence. Lady Selwyn received invitations from Alderwick House and declined 2 of them without consulting Phoebe. The Dowager Duchess sent no private message. Arabella reported that Edmund had repeated the same plain answer whenever the failed alliance was mentioned. Neither sister had deceived society into an engagement. He had permitted assumptions beyond their agreement and withdrawn when corrected. He did not make himself heroic in the telling. He did not ask whether Phoebe had heard. One rain-heavy afternoon, Lady Selwyn placed a small parcel on Phoebe's desk. Inside were the final corrected proofs and a fresh bundle of writing paper. "Your translation is finished," she said. "You may take tomorrow morning for yourself." Phoebe looked at the blank pages. "Is that an instruction?" Certainly not. I have learned the danger of instructing you about letters. Lady Selwyn left her alone. Phoebe opened the drawer where she kept the blue packet. During her first month in London, she had read every page. She had found passages that still moved her, and others made unbearable by the full signature below them. She had considered burning the letters. She had kept them instead, not as a romance, but as a record of what words could do when separated from ownership. Now she took out Edmund's final reply, the one announcing his journey to Bellamy Hall. He had written that he wished to replace the safety of correspondence with the greater honesty of being known. Neither of them had understood the price of that sentence. Phoebe placed a fresh sheet on the desk. Before writing a salutation, she signed the bottom, Phoebe Bellamy. Then she began, "My dear Duke of Alderwick, this is not an answer to any question you have asked, because you have kept your word and asked none. If you still wish to know me, you may write one letter. Address it to Phoebe Bellamy. Do not send it through my family. Do not call what follows an understanding. And do not mistake one reply for a promise of another. Tell me something true that cannot be made safer by arranging it." She read the lines twice. They were neither tender nor cold. They were an opening with a door she could close. Phoebe sealed the letter with her own plain signet. At Alderwick House, Edmund received it 2 mornings later. He recognized her hand before he saw the signature, but he made himself look at the name, Phoebe Bellamy. Only then did he break the seal. He read the letter standing beside the same desk where he had once written to Lady Selwyn without permission. When he finished, hope moved through him with such force that he gripped the chair. The old instinct followed at once. Send the carriage. Clear the week. Go to London before uncertainty could alter the invitation. Then he read her words again. "You may write one letter." Edmund sat down. He drew a blank page toward him and remained still until hope no longer sounded like a command. Outside, the morning bells marked the hour. Inside, the Duke of Alderwick waited before writing the first sentence of a courtship that belonged to both of them.